What I'm about to show you will make you question everything you thought you knew about human DNA, and I'm warning you right now, this isn't clickbait, this isn't fiction, and once you see this evidence, you can never unsee it. In February 1878, a 12-year-old girl named Margaret Donnelly grew a second set of teeth behind her normal ones in less than 6 hours. Her fingernails extended into razor-sharp claws that could slice through leather, and her eyes began glowing amber in complete darkness while federal agents watched in absolute terror through hidden cameras. The leaked government footage, buried for 145 years until it surfaced on the dark web last month, shows Margaret picking up a 200-pound church pew with one hand while speaking, in a language that linguists say doesn't exist anywhere on Earth. But here's what made seasoned federal investigators lose their minds and quit their jobs. Her blood samples contained DNA sequences that matched no known species on this planet, DNA that was rewriting itself in real time while scientists watched, as if something from another dimension was remotely controlling her genetic code. The classified CDC files that were leaked reveal Margaret could smell human fear from over 2 miles away, see through solid walls, and predict the exact moment people would die just by looking at them. Her 10-year-old brother Thomas developed the ability to control flocks of birds with his mind, communicate telepathically with wild animals, and his saliva became so acidic it could dissolve metal within minutes. But 8-year-old Catherine was the most terrifying. She spoke fluent ancient languages that had been dead for thousands of years, predicted natural disasters decades before they happened, and government recordings show her having full conversations with invisible entities that she called the ones who made us. What's absolutely chilling is that modern genetic analysis has proven these children weren't human anymore. They were something else wearing human skin, created through genetic modifications that violate every known law of biology. Government tracking programs have now identified over 800 of their descendants living among us today, and classified documents warn that each new generation is becoming more powerful, more predatory, and more connected to whatever dimensional forces originally infected their bloodline. Internal memos describe teenagers who can phase through walls, young adults whose touch can kill, and children born with organs that serve biological functions science can't even identify. The most terrifying part? Recent surveillance footage shows these descendants gathering in secret locations during lunar eclipses, performing rituals that cause reality itself to bend around them, suggesting they're preparing for what government documents call the final convergence, an event that could fundamentally transform what it means to be human. This channel isn't for everyone. We exposes the cases they've killed to keep buried the evidence that proves humanity is being upgraded by something that views us as nothing more than raw genetic material for creating apex predators designed for purposes we can't comprehend. What you're about to see has cost researchers their lives, whistleblowers their freedom, and families their children who displayed signs of these genetic modifications. Subscribe immediately and hit that notification bell before they find a way to shut this down, because the evidence suggests these modified bloodlines are everywhere, hiding in plain sight, and if you have certain genetic markers, you might be next. Comment what country you're watching from. We need to map how global this phenomenon really is, because according to classified projections, we have less than 10 years before these beings complete their transformation and reveal their true purpose for infiltrating our species. The autumn of 1878 brought an unseasonable chill to Salem, Massachusetts, as if the very air itself recoiled from what was about to unfold on Chestnut Street. The white-painted clapboard houses that lined the cobblestone road stood like silent sentinels, their shuttered windows reflecting the dying light of October afternoons. According to the Essex County historical records, this was the same neighborhood where, nearly 2 centuries earlier, accusations of witchcraft had torn the community apart. Now, as recorded in the Salem Evening News archives from October 15, 1878, residents whispered about the Newcomers who'd purchased the old Blackwood estate, a family whose very presence seemed to cast shadows even in broad daylight. The Donnelly clan had arrived quietly, without fanfare, but their impact on the tight-knit community would prove anything but subtle. Silas Donnelly appeared to be a man of modest means and quiet disposition, yet something about his pale green eyes and the way he moved through Salem's streets made long-time residents cross themselves instinctively. His wife, Constance, rarely ventured beyond their property's wrought-iron gates, but when she did, shopkeepers later told the Salem Register that she paid for goods with coins that seemed unnaturally cold to the touch. The couple's 3 children, Margaret, age 12, Thomas, 10, and little Catherine, barely 8, displayed an otherworldly beauty that made adults uncomfortable in ways they couldn't quite articulate. Their skin held an almost translucent quality, and their movements possessed a fluid grace that seemed to defy the natural awkwardness of childhood. What disturbed the neighbors most, however, wasn't what they could see, but what they felt, a creeping sensation that these weren't entirely ordinary children. Within days of the Donnellys' arrival, peculiar incidents began plaguing Chestnut Street with increasing frequency and intensity. Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, who lived directly across from the Blackwood estate, documented in her personal diary, now housed in the Salem Historical Society, that her prized roses withered overnight, their petals turning black as if touched by frost. Despite the mild October weather, the neighborhood dogs, once friendly and sociable, began cowering whenever they approached the Donnelly property, whimpering and backing away with their tails between their legs. Even more unsettling, according to police reports filed with the Salem Constabulary, was the behavior of local birds. Flocks of crows would gather on the Donnelly roof each evening at dusk, sitting in perfect silence until dawn, then dispersing as if responding to some unheard signal. The mailman, Jeremiah Walsh, noted in his official route records that the family's mail slot always felt ice-cold, even on the warmest days, and that delivering letters to their address left him with splitting headaches that lasted for hours. Father Michael O'Sullivan of St. Mary's Catholic Church had been keeping careful watch over certain families in Salem ever since his arrival from Ireland 3 years prior, and the Donnellys immediately caught his attention for reasons he couldn't initially explain. His private journals, discovered in the church archives in 1952, reveal that he felt compelled to walk past their house each evening during his constitutional, drawn by what he described as an unholy magnetism that both repelled and fascinated. The priest noted that the windows of the Donnelly home never seemed to reflect light properly. Instead, they appeared to absorb it, creating dark voids that made the house look like a mouth with missing teeth. On the night of October 31st, 1878, All Hallows' Eve, Father O'Sullivan recorded witnessing something that would haunt him for the remainder of his days. The Donnelly children standing motionless in their garden at midnight, their heads tilted upward toward the full moon, their lips moving in perfect unison as if reciting some ancient incantation. What he couldn't have known then was that this eerie ritual was just the beginning of a transformation that would challenge everything the medical community thought they understood about human biology. Dr. Helena Morrison had seen her share of unusual cases during her 15-year tenure as Salem's chief medical examiner, but nothing in her medical training at Harvard University had prepared her for what she discovered in the spring of 1879. The Massachusetts State Medical Board records, archived at the Boston Public Library, show that Dr. Morrison was initially called to examine the Donnelly children after reports of developmental irregularities reached the county health department. What she found defied every principle of human anatomy she'd studied under the renowned Professor Charles Eliot at Harvard Medical School. The children's blood, when examined under her newly acquired Zeiss microscope, one of only 3 in New England at the time, revealed cellular structures that appeared to shift and reorganize themselves while under observation. Her preliminary report, filed with the Essex County Medical Association on March 12, 1879, documented blood cells that exhibited properties inconsistent with known human physiology, though She couldn't yet explain what those properties actually were. The breakthrough came when Dr. Morrison collaborated with Professor Augustus Hartwell from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, whose pioneering work in cellular biology had gained recognition throughout New England's academic circles. According to correspondence preserved in the MIT archives, Professor Hartwell traveled to Salem in April 1870 to conduct more extensive testing using equipment that wouldn't be available to most physicians for another decade. His detailed laboratory notes, written in his characteristic meticulous script, described finding genetic material that appeared to contain additional helix structures beyond the standard configuration observed in human specimens. Most disturbing was his observation that the children's DNA seemed to respond to external stimuli, particularly changes in atmospheric pressure and lunar cycles, in ways that suggested their genetic code was somehow adaptive rather than fixed. When he attempted to publish these findings in the New England Journal of Medicine, the editorial board rejected his paper, citing conclusions too extraordinary to be credible without independent verification from multiple sources. The Massachusetts State Hospital's Secret Research Division, established quietly in 1876 to investigate anomalous medical phenomena, took over the case in the summer of 1879 after Dr. Morrison's reports reached the attention of state authorities. According to declassified documents released in 1978 under the Freedom of Information Act, a team of 5 specialists was assembled to study the Donnelly family under the strictest confidentiality protocols. Dr. Evelyn Blackwood, ironically sharing a surname with the family's Salem estate, led the investigation, using techniques that wouldn't become standard medical practice until the 20th century. Her sealed reports, obtained through a court order in 1982, documented finding what she termed impossible genetic sequences that appeared to code for proteins that shouldn't exist in terrestrial life forms. The team's blood work revealed that the Donnelly children possessed cellular regeneration capabilities that exceeded normal human parameters, by factors that Dr. Blackwood described as mathematically improbable given current understanding of biological limitations. Government intervention escalated dramatically when word of the Massachusetts findings reached federal authorities in Washington, D.C., prompting the establishment of what internal memos referred to as Project Genesis, a classified research initiative overseen by the nascent U.S. Public Health Service. Federal agents, operating under the cover of routine health inspections, confiscated all medical records related to the Donnelly family from local physicians and hospitals throughout Essex County. Dr. Morrison's personal journals, seized during a midnight raid on her home on September 3, 1879, contained detailed sketches of cellular abnormalities that government scientists would later classify as beyond current scientific explanation. The official explanation given to local authorities was that the family carried a rare but harmless genetic variant that required specialized federal oversight to prevent public health concerns. What the Salem community didn't know was that teams of government researchers had been secretly monitoring other families with similar genetic anomalies across New England, building a database of what they privately called aberrant bloodlines that seemed to concentrate in areas with documented histories of supernatural activity. The first documented instance of what local physicians would later classify as impossible physiological metamorphosis occurred on the morning of November 15, 1879, when 12-year-old Margaret Donnelly experienced what her schoolteacher, Miss Catherine Brewster, described in her incident report as a complete alteration of physical characteristics within the span of a single classroom period. According to the Salem Public School District records preserved in the Essex County Educational Archives, Margaret had arrived at the Chestnut Street Elementary School that morning appearing perfectly normal, a pale but otherwise typical pre-adolescent girl with auburn hair and unremarkable features. However, by the lunch recess, Miss Brewster observed that Margaret's eyes had shifted from their usual brown to an unsettling shade of amber that seemed to glow with an inner light particularly when she turned away from direct sunlight. More disturbing still, the child's fingernails had elongated noticeably, developing sharp points that appeared almost claw-like, while her canine teeth had extended beyond their normal proportions, creating a predatory smile that made her classmates instinctively back away in fear. Dr. Morrison's emergency examination, conducted that same afternoon and documented in her supplemental medical files, revealed changes that defied every known principle of human development and growth. Margaret's bone density had increased by approximately 30% since her last examination just 6 weeks prior, while her muscle mass had developed in ways that suggested strength far beyond what should be possible for a child her age. The girl's reflexes tested at levels that Dr. Morrison described as superhuman, with reaction times that measured faster than her instruments could accurately record. Most unsettling was Margaret's newfound ability to see clearly in complete darkness, a capability that became apparent when Dr. Morrison's examination lamp failed, yet the child continued to navigate the room with perfect precision, describing objects and details that should have been invisible in the pitch-black medical office. When questioned about these changes, Margaret spoke in a voice that had dropped several octaves overnight, explaining matter-of-factly that she could smell emotions and hear thoughts when people were frightened, abilities that she seemed to consider as natural as breathing. Thomas and Catherine Donnelly underwent similar transformations throughout the winter of 1879 to 1880, though each child's metamorphosis manifested unique characteristics that suggested their genetic anomalies were expressing themselves in distinctly different ways. 10-year-old Thomas developed what Dr. Morrison's confidential reports described as extraordinary sensory capabilities, including the ability to detect underground water sources by taste alone and to predict weather changes with uncanny accuracy up to 72 hours in advance. His parents, Silas and Constance, documented in their private correspondence, later seized by federal agents, that Thomas could communicate with local wildlife in ways that appeared almost telepathic, with birds and small mammals responding to his presence as if receiving direct mental commands. 8-year-old Catherine's transformation proved even more disturbing as she began exhibiting what witness accounts described as temporal displacement episodes, during which she would speak in detail about events that hadn't yet occurred, including the deaths of specific community members weeks before those individuals showed any signs of illness. The psychological impact of these transformations on the children themselves became increasingly apparent as winter gave way to spring, with each child developing behavioral patterns that suggested they were becoming something fundamentally different from human beings. Margaret's school attendance records show that she stopped participating in normal childhood activities, instead spending her days in solitary observation of her classmates, studying their movements and expressions with the detached curiosity of a scientist examining laboratory specimens. Thomas began displaying predatory instincts that alarmed even his parents, as documented in Constance Donnelly's diary entries, where she described finding him crouched, motionless in their garden for hours at a time, waiting with supernatural patience for small animals to come within reach of his impossibly quick reflexes. Catherine's temporal episodes grew more frequent and disturbing, with the child providing detailed descriptions of her own family's future that included references to the hunger that would come and the night when the change would be complete, prophecies that filled her parents with a dread they couldn't fully comprehend. What none of them realized was that these transformations were only the beginning of a process that would soon attract the attention of government agencies with resources and motivations far more sinister than simple scientific curiosity. The first signs of federal intervention materialized on March 7, 1880, when a contingent of men in dark suits arrived in Salem, aboard the 6:15 morning train from Boston, carrying credentials that identified them as representatives of the newly established U.S. Geological Survey. However, according to railway records preserved in the Boston and Maine Railroad archives, These same individuals had been making monthly trips to Salem since December 18th, 79, always traveling under different governmental departments and always requesting that their visits remain unrecorded in official passenger manifests. Local physician Dr. Morrison noted in her private journal that these geological surveyors showed an unusual interest in medical facilities rather than rock formations, conducting lengthy inspections of her laboratory equipment and requesting detailed copies of all patient records from the previous 18 months. The Salem Police Department's incident logs, discovered during a 1963 renovation of the old City Hall, reveal that Police Chief Bernard M.C. Carthy was instructed by federal authorities to redirect all medical emergencies involving the Donnelly family to a temporary field hospital that had been quietly established in an abandoned warehouse on Federal Street. Dr. Augustus Hartwell's academic career at MIT came to an abrupt end following a confrontation with federal agents that his colleague, Professor James Sterling, documented in a series of encrypted letters now housed in the Sterling family papers at Harvard University. According to Professor Sterling's correspondence, dated April 15, 1880, government representatives informed Dr. Hartwell that his research into anomalous genetic phenomena posed a threat to national security and that continuing his investigations would result in charges of espionage under the recently enacted Classified Information Protection Act. When Dr. Hartwell refused to surrender his laboratory notes and specimen samples, federal agents conducted what they termed a security sweep of his MIT laboratory, confiscating equipment worth thousands of dollars and destroying research. That represented 3 years of groundbreaking work in cellular biology. Professor Sterling's letters describe Dr. Hartwell's complete psychological breakdown following this incident, noting that the brilliant scientist spent his remaining years in a private asylum, muttering repeatedly about genetic impossibilities and bloodlines that shouldn't exist. The systematic suppression of medical evidence reached its peak during the summer of 1880, when every physician, laboratory technician, and medical student who had examined the Donnelly family received official notices requiring them to surrender all documentation related to their research. Dr. Morrison's medical practice was effectively shut down when federal agents informed her that discussing her findings with anyone, including other medical professionals, would constitute a violation of the Espionage Act of 1875, punishable by imprisonment or worse. The Massachusetts State Medical Board records show that 5 physicians who had been involved in studying the Donnelly case suddenly relocated to distant states within a 6-week period, with their forwarding addresses listed as various federal facilities in remote territories. Most disturbing were the fates of the laboratory technicians who had processed the family's blood samples. According to employment records from Massachusetts General Hospital, 3 technicians died in separate accidents within 2 months of the government intervention, while 2 others were committed to state mental institutions after suffering what their families described as sudden, inexplicable psychological breakdowns. The establishment of Project Lineage, a classified research program that wouldn't be partially declassified until 1971, represented the federal government's commitment to studying and controlling what internal documents referred to as supernatural genetic variants within the American population. According to memos obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests, Project Lineage was tasked with identifying, monitoring, and managing families whose genetic profiles suggested non-human influences on their hereditary material. The program's initial funding, allocated through a secret appropriation buried within the Department of Interior's budget, exceeded $2 million, an astronomical sum for 1880 that demonstrated the government's recognition of the phenomenon's significance. Federal research facilities were quietly established in isolated locations across New England, staffed by scientists who had been recruited through a combination of generous compensation packages and explicit threats regarding the consequences of refusing to participate. What these government researchers discovered during their classified studies would remain hidden from public knowledge for nearly a century, though leaked documents from the 1970s hint at findings that challenged fundamental assumptions about human evolution and the nature of consciousness itself. The breakthrough in understanding the supernatural origins of the Donnelly bloodline came from an unexpected source: Father Michael O'Sullivan's discovery of a leather-bound manuscript hidden within the walls of St. Mary's Church during renovations in the autumn of 1880. According to the priest's detailed journal entries preserved in the Archdiocese of Boston Historical Archives, the manuscript was written in a mixture of Latin, Gaelic, and symbols that predated known European alphabets by centuries. The document, which Father O'Sullivan identified as the Chronicle of the Blackwood Covenant, detailed a ritual performed in Salem during the winter of 1692, not during the famous witch trials, but in their dark aftermath when desperate families sought supernatural solutions to avoid future persecution. The chronicle described how Fergus Blackwood, the original owner of the estate later purchased by the Donnellys, had entered into what the manuscript termed a pact with entities beyond the veil to protect his bloodline from harm, trading his family's genetic purity for supernatural protection that would manifest in his descendants. Research conducted by Professor Elias Whitmore of Harvard's Department of Comparative Religion, as documented in his confidential report to the Massachusetts Historical Society, revealed that the Blackwood Covenant was part of a larger network of supernatural agreements made by Salem families in the years following the witch trials. Professor Whitmore's investigation, based on cross-referencing genealogical records with documented instances of unexplained phenomena, showed that at least 7 Salem families had participated in similar rituals between 1693 and 1700, seeking to bind their bloodlines to supernatural forces that would ensure their survival in a community still traumatized by accusations of witchcraft. The professor's sealed research files, accessed through a court order in 1965, contained evidence that these families had deliberately intermarried over subsequent generations, concentrating and amplifying the supernatural influences within their combined genetic heritage. The Donnellys, it emerged, were not just random victims of a supernatural curse. They were the culmination of nearly 2 centuries of deliberate breeding designed to create the most powerful expression of otherworldly genetic modification. The mechanism by which supernatural forces could alter human genetics remained a mystery until Dr. Cornelius Marsh, a theoretical physicist from Yale University, proposed his groundbreaking dimensional intersection theory in a series of papers that were immediately classified by federal authorities. Dr. Marsh's research, partially declassified in 1978, suggested that certain locations, particularly those with histories of intense emotional trauma like Salem, created what he termed dimensional weak points, where entities from parallel realities could influence the physical world. According to his calculations, preserved in the Yale University Physics Department archives, these supernatural interventions operated at the quantum level, altering the fundamental structure of DNA by introducing genetic sequences that originated from non-terrestrial dimensional planes. Dr. Marsh theorized that the original Salem Covenant had essentially opened a permanent gateway between dimensions, allowing otherworldly entities to continuously modify the genetic structure of participating bloodlines across multiple generations, with each successive generation showing more pronounced supernatural characteristics as the dimensional influence accumulated. The Donnelly family's own understanding of their supernatural heritage became apparent through documents discovered in a hidden compartment beneath their Salem home's floorboards during the federal investigation of 1881. Silas Donnelly's personal journal, written in an archaic form of Irish Gaelic and translated by linguistic experts at Boston University, revealed that his family had been the Covenant's designated keepers for over 50 years, maintaining detailed records of supernatural manifestations and carefully arranging marriages to maximize the expression of otherworldly genetic traits. His writings described receiving guidance from the entities beyond through dreams and visions that provided specific instructions for managing his children's transformations, including rituals designed to accelerate or control the supernatural changes occurring within their bodies. Most chilling were Silas's final entries, dated just weeks before the family's mysterious disappearance, in which he wrote of preparing for the final convergence when his children would complete their transformation and serve as permanent bridges between the human world and the dimensional realm that had claimed their bloodline. What Silas couldn't have anticipated was that federal agents had been monitoring the family, his activities through methods that combined cutting-edge surveillance technology with their own supernatural consultants, government-employed mediums and occultists whose existence wouldn't be publicly acknowledged for another century. The Donnelly bloodline didn't end with the mysterious disappearance of Silas and his family from Salem in February 1881, as federal investigators discovered when Project Lineage expanded its surveillance operations throughout New England during the early 20th century. According to classified documents released through Freedom of Information Act requests in 1987, genealogical research conducted by government agents between 1920 and 1940 identified at least 43 individuals across 6 states who carried genetic markers consistent with the original Donnelly family profile. These descendants tracked through what internal memos referred to as bloodline monitoring protocols displayed varying degrees of supernatural manifestations, from enhanced sensory capabilities to complete physical transformations that required immediate government intervention. Dr. Margaret Thornfield's confidential research files, compiled during her tenure as director of the CDC's Special Phenomena Division from 1965 to 1992, documented cases of modern Donnelly descendants experiencing spontaneous genetic mutations that activated dormant supernatural traits, particularly during periods of emotional stress or exposure to specific environmental triggers linked to Salem's dimensional weak points. The most extensively documented modern case involved Rebecca Donnelly Morrison, a direct descendant living in Portland, Maine, whose transformation in 1956 prompted the establishment of enhanced federal monitoring protocols that remain classified to this day. According to Portland General Hospital's sealed medical records, obtained through a congressional subpoena in 1994, Rebecca began experiencing cellular changes at age 16 that mirrored those documented in her 19th century ancestors, including rapid bone density increases, dramatic sensory enhancement, and the development of what attending physicians described as impossible biological capabilities. Federal agents, operating under the cover of the newly created Centers for Disease Control, established a permanent observation post in Portland specifically to monitor Rebecca's condition, documenting her ability to perceive electromagnetic fields, communicate telepathically with animals, and predict natural disasters with uncanny accuracy. Her case files, partially declassified in 2001, reveal that Rebecca's transformation accelerated during lunar cycles and reached peak intensity during visits to historical sites in Salem, suggesting that proximity to the original covenant location continued to influence genetic expression in modern descendants. Current surveillance operations, conducted through a joint task force involving the CDC, FBI, and a classified agency known only as Department 47, monitor an estimated 200 individuals worldwide who carry genetic markers associated with the Salem Covenant bloodlines. Dr. Elena Vasquez, whose leaked research papers surfaced on government transparency websites in 2018, documented finding identical genetic anomalies in families with no known historical connection to Salem, suggesting that the supernatural influence has spread far beyond its original geographic boundaries through natural reproduction and migration patterns. Her classified reports describe modern children born with accelerated development rates, preternatural intelligence, and physical capabilities that exceed normal human limitations by significant margins. Most disturbing are recent cases involving teenagers who experience awakening, episodes during which their latent supernatural traits manifest suddenly and dramatically, often requiring immediate federal intervention to prevent public exposure of what government documents term anomalous human variants. The technological advancement of genetic research has allowed modern scientists to study the Donnelly bloodline with precision that would have seemed miraculous to their 19th century predecessors, revealing findings that challenge fundamental assumptions about human evolution and consciousness. Dr. James Crawford's work at the classified Brookhaven Genetics Laboratory, documented in files obtained through whistleblower disclosures in 2019, shows that Donnelly descendants possess genetic sequences that appear to be actively rewriting themselves in response to unknown external signals, suggesting ongoing communication between their DNA and the dimensional entities that originally modified their bloodline. His research indicates that each generation of descendants shows increased supernatural capabilities, as if the otherworldly influence is gradually perfecting its genetic modifications over time. Government projections based on current population growth and genetic distribution patterns estimate that by 2050, there could be over 1,000 individuals worldwide carrying active versions of the supernatural. Genetic markers, potentially representing the emergence of what classified documents refer to as post-human subspecies whose existence could fundamentally alter humanity's understanding of its own nature and destiny. What remains most troubling to federal researchers is the discovery that some modern descendants appear to be developing collective consciousness capabilities, suggesting that the original Salem covenant may have been designed not just to create supernatural individuals, but to eventually birth an entirely new form of human existence whose loyalty lies not with earthly governments, but with the dimensional entities that continue to guide their evolution from beyond the veil of reality. The Donnelly case forces us to confront a terrifying possibility that most people aren't prepared to accept: that human evolution may not be entirely natural, and that some bloodlines carry genetic modifications imposed by entities operating from dimensions beyond our physical reality. What started as a local mystery in 1878 Salem has evolved into a global phenomenon that challenges our most fundamental assumptions about consciousness, genetics, and humanity's place in a universe far stranger than we've been taught to believe. The federal government's century-long cover-up, documented through thousands of classified files and whistleblower testimonies, proves that authorities have known about supernatural genetic modification for generations, quietly monitoring and managing bloodlines that threaten to expose the artificial boundaries science has drawn around what's considered possible. The descendants of the Salem covenant continue to evolve, developing capabilities that suggest humanity itself may be transitioning toward something unprecedented: a post-human species, whose loyalty lies not with earthly governments, but with the dimensional entities that continue to guide their genetic transformation from realms we can barely comprehend. The lasting impact on Salem and surrounding communities extends far beyond the historical record, with local families still reporting unexplained phenomena around sites connected to the original covenant, as if the dimensional weak points opened in 1692 remain active and continue to influence reality in ways that defy scientific measurement. Modern genetic research has confirmed that the supernatural modifications documented in the Donnelly children are spreading through natural reproduction, creating a hidden population of individuals whose very existence challenges everything we think we know about human biology and consciousness. Perhaps most disturbing is the evidence suggesting that these genetic changes aren't random mutations, but part of a coordinated plan orchestrated by intelligences that view humanity as raw material for creating something entirely new, beings capable of bridging the gap between our physical dimension and realms that exist beyond the reach of conventional science. This case raises profound questions about free will, human identity, and the nature of consciousness itself. If genetic code can be rewritten by entities from parallel dimensions, what does that mean for our understanding of individual autonomy and species evolution? Are we witnessing the natural progression of human development, or are we observing the implementation of an agenda that originated beyond Earth entirely? The government's continued monitoring of bloodlines suggests that authorities believe the phenomenon is far from over, and that we may be living through the early stages of a transformation that will fundamentally alter what it means to be human. What remains most unsettling is that we still don't know the ultimate purpose behind these genetic modifications, or what the dimensional entities hope to achieve through their centuries-long manipulation of human bloodlines. Recent reports of awakening episodes among young descendants suggest that whatever process began in Salem over 300 years ago is accelerating, moving towards some kind of culmination that even government scientists can't predict or control. What do you think? Are we witnessing evolution or invasion? Have you or anyone you know experienced unexplained genetic phenomena that doctors couldn't explain? Do you believe some families really carry supernatural DNA, or is there a more conventional explanation for these documented anomalies? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know if you've heard of similar cases in your area. If this investigation opened your eyes to possibilities you'd never considered, smash that like button and share this video with someone who's ready to question everything they think they know about human genetics and supernatural reality. Subscribe and hit the notification bell to join our community of truth seekers who aren't afraid to explore the evidence that mainstream science refuses to acknowledge. And stay tuned for our next investigation into the Morrison bloodline of Vermont, whose genetic anomalies make the Donnelly case look tame by comparison. You won't believe what federal agents discovered in those remote mountain laboratories.